Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has delivered a special session, has addressed a special session of the European Parliament as it debated Russia's invasion of his country. In an emotional speech delivered from Kyiv, President Zelenskyy described recent attacks on Ukrainian cities and accused Russia of targeting children. And he repeated his appeal for his country's immediate membership of the EU, saying the bloc would be stronger with Ukraine in it.
We are fighting just for our land and for our freedom. Despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked, nobody is going to enter and intervene with our freedom and country. And believe you me, every square up today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square in every city of our country. Nobody is going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians.
Meanwhile, Russian troops are bearing down on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Satellite images appear to show a 60-kilometre convoy of military vehicles approaching from the north of the city. The convoy includes hundreds of armoured vehicles, tanks and artillery. Ukrainian forces have repelled earlier attacks by Russian forces near the capital and destroyed several Russian vehicles close to the city centre. Well, Sergei Petkov is a former Deputy Minister of Justice for European Integration of Ukraine. He now lectures at the National University of Kyiv Molia Academy and joins us from the Ukrainian capital. Welcome to DW. Perhaps we could start by you telling us what you know of what's happening in the city as we speak.
Well, the situation is quite nervous here. Less than an hour ago, we've seen an official message from the Ministry of Defense of Russia, who said they are going to bomb Kyiv, supposedly concentrating on the military infrastructure and communications. And they warned the Kyivans that they should be leaving those locations. The cynical part of it is that, I don't know what they're referring to. No one knows what exact location they are planning to bomb. And it seems like they're just making fun of and making a pretext of bombing the civilians. And so the last 2 days were relatively quiet because the Ukrainian army managed to push the Russians away from the capital. But now that we see this message, we're seeing that Russia failing in a conventional war is going to continue what they are already doing in Mariupol and Kharkiv in the east of Ukraine, targeting the civilians in violation of international humanitarian law.
And how concerned are you by these reports of a 60-kilometre Russian convoy bearing down on the city?
Now, look, Russia amassed a huge army on the borders of Ukraine, and all of it has been entering Ukraine from north, east and south, from occupied Crimea, from Belarus that is supporting Russia. So, we've been seeing this for 5 days already. There's no new information. We're following this in the real time, just like you. We're looking for what's going to happen next. We have a trust in our army, but also we have our territorial defense people. And I think that unless Putin chooses to do the indiscriminate shelling of the city, we have good chances. It's not only the army that is opposing the Putin, but it's also the people in Kyiv. And as you know, in a city, ordinary person with a Molotov cocktail and with a gun has just as many chances as the military equipment, as tanks. And we are well organized and ready to stand our ground. We've organized, for example, in our residential complex, there are people who have guns officially, and we are patrolling our neighborhood at the night, and we're ready for whatever comes next.
We've heard President Zelenskyy appealing for Ukraine to be admitted to the EU immediately. How would that help in Ukraine's fight against Russia?
Look, people here are standing the ground of the Russian aggression, not only against our country, but against the whole free world and the continent. That's how we see it, and that's finally how Europe sees it. And I think it's just about time for Europe to show the solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And this is the best way that they can do that. I mean, saying that you are part of our family, this war is our war, it's not just your problem. And I think we can, talk about the details later, but the political gesture, the sign of solidarity is something that would really reassure the people, because again, it's not just the army or the politicians who are fighting against aggression. You could see the video footage from around the country of ordinary people going in front of, stopping them. So these people need a reassurance and this clear message from Europe.
And I'd just like to ask you a quick question about these peace talks that have begun. Any sort of peace talk is going to require compromise. What sort of political compromise can you envisage being given to Russia in order to stop this attack?
At this point of time, I don't think anyone, both in Ukraine and Russia, believes in the success of these negotiations. We are standing at the opposite positions right now. So from what I gather from the official information that came out of it, and what I think could be useful, is only the humanitarian pause. So if we can agree on abiding by the rules of armed conflicts, if we can agree that the civilians should not be targeted, if we can agree the safe zones around and above our nuclear power stations, that would be a great success already. I don't think these talks can lead to any solution to this conflict, but I do believe that even trying to make it safe for civilians, or make it safe and stop the possible ecological catastrophe, environmental damage that can happen out of straight attack over nuclear station or an object like that, is already something that makes these negotiations important.
That's very clear. Thank you so much for joining us and explaining that to us. Serhiy Petkov, a former Deputy Minister of Justice for European Integration of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Russian forces are continuing their bombardment of Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv. Rockets have struck the city centre, damaging administrative buildings, an attack that President Zelenskyy has described as a war crime. Russia denies targeting residential areas or civilian infrastructure, and Russian media claim Russian forces are targeting military targets. City officials in Kharkiv say several residents have been killed during 2 days of sustained bombing.
An onslaught in Kharkiv, a city with 1.5 million residents. Ukraine says Russia targeted residential buildings with volleys of rockets. People in a maternity ward forced to flee to a bomb shelter. Ukraine's president has condemned the bombardment, calling for it to be brought before an international tribunal.
Today, Russian forces brutally attacked Kharkiv using rockets. Clearly a war crime. Peaceful city, peaceful residential areas, no military facilities. Dozens of eyewitness records prove this was not a mistake, but the deliberate destruction of people. The Russians knew where they were shooting.
Moscow denies the accusations. Ever more civilians are joining the fight to push back Russian troops from Kharkiv.
I have 6 children at home and a wife. I'm from Kharkiv. The day before yesterday, I decided to take up arms and protect my city. When I made my decision, of course my wife and my 10-year-old son cried. They tried to stop me from joining the fighters, but finally they understood. It's our land that we have to defend. We can't back down.
Ukraine is also inviting foreigners to fight for the country as it braces for a new phase in the war.
Here in Berlin, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has been meeting Luxembourg's Prime Minister. Here's a clip of some of the statement that he gave a short while ago.
Together with my colleague, I would like to call on the Russian president to cease all combat immediately, to withdraw all troops from Ukraine and to enter into a dialogue. Bloodshed must stop. Vladimir Putin is committing crimes on Ukraine.
We can get more on this from DW politics correspondent Nina Haase, who joins us from the German Chancellery in Berlin. Welcome, Nina. A quote there from the Chancellor: Vladimir Putin is committing crimes on Ukraine. Strong words from a Chancellor who just a few weeks ago was being accused of being invisible on this crisis.
Well, I would say even a few days ago, Phil, this is a remarkable and unprecedented, a dizzying turnaround for the German government in its stance towards Russia. Just a few days ago, a statement like that would have been inconceivable. Germany was criticized for a very long time to stay silent on the topic. They refused to deliver weapons. They stayed out of all the potential sanctions measures when tensions were already rising. And now, since Russia's invasion, the German government really has performed a 180-degree turn on its policy. Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, calls this Putin's war. He says the bloodshed must stop, and he says there can be no taboos anymore. This must be sanctioned. This must be punished. Now, of course, this is something where Germany was late, and many people still criticize that. But this is also not just a Ukraine crisis, is the message here from the German government. This is potentially about defending something much bigger, about European values.
And another big turnaround is Chancellor Scholz talking about becoming less dependent on Russian energy. How does he propose to do that?
Well, this is something where especially the Greens that are now part of this government coalition have long warned that Germany's high dependency on Russian energy exports, so on the imports of Russian gas, for example. Germany gets more than 50% of its gas from Russia. That this is a question where it's not just about whether or not we want to use fossil fuels in the future. It is about a question of geopolitical independence. So this was something that the Greens in particular warned already a year ago, and they won the election with this pledge of making Germany fossil-free. Now, of course, current events are speeding up this development, and again, there are no taboos anymore. The economy minister has said that all options are on the table now, that Germany is really looking into everything that it can to help reduce its dependency on Russian energy. So they're building now 2 LNG terminals, something that just a week ago was unheard of and inconceivable, really. They're also looking at potentially keeping the nuclear power plants running longer, even though they say that those are very old and it's not very realistic. But probably what I can say now is that the goal of exiting coal here in Germany, that is probably something that is not going to be sustained.
OK, thank you for that. DW political correspondent Nina Haase. Well, diplomats from around the world have walked out of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva as Russia's foreign minister delivered a pre-recorded speech. Ukraine's ambassador led diplomats out of the chamber in protest at the Russian invasion. Sergei Lavrov's speech followed Switzerland joining the EU in banning Russian flights from its airspace. The Russian foreign minister sought to justify his country's actions by claiming Moscow was trying to protect ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine from the government in Kyiv.
The purpose of our action is to save these people by fulfilling our obligations as allies and to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine so that such a thing will never occur again. This is particularly relevant in the light of the fact that this country is being dragged into NATO, that the country is being flooded with offensive weapons, and this is a country which has openly made territorial claims against the Russian Federation and threatened to use force and to acquire military nuclear capability.
All right, some more headlines related to this war in Ukraine. The United States is expelling 12 Russian UN diplomats, accusing them of being spies. Russia's UN ambassador, Vasily Nebenzia, told a session of the Security Council about the move, describing it as a hostile step. He later refused to specify whether he was amongst those told to leave. Ukraine's Navy says its soldiers stationed on Snake Island are alive and have been taken as prisoners of war by Russia. They were presumed killed after refusing to surrender to a Russian warship in the Black Sea. A defiant response went viral, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy honoured them as heroes of Ukraine. The International Criminal Court in The Hague will launch an investigation into this situation in Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Chief prosecutor said there was a reasonable basis to believe that alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity have been committed. Russia does not recognise the court's authority. Now, the United Nations says more than 660,000 people have fled Ukraine since the invasion began, with the majority heading to Poland. The UN fears that that number could rise to as high as 4 million over the coming weeks. Shelters have been set up along the border with Ukraine. This report comes from Przemysl, where Polish people are giving some of the refugees a warm welcome.
Another train arrives at Przemysl station in Poland. On board, refugees who are fleeing from the neighbouring war zone in Ukraine. Most arriving here are women, children and the elderly. At the moment, Ukrainian men aged between 18 and 60 who are fit for military service are not allowed to leave Ukraine.
It is hard to leave, very hard, especially for little children. But somehow we did it, and we're here now. I am glad for the children, but I am very worried about the family members who decided to stay in Ukraine. We are so grateful to the Polish people who are helping Ukraine. Putin is a sick man. Something is wrong with him. If he were smart, he wouldn't have begun the war in the first place. We're living in the 21st century.
Volunteers give the refugees food and everyday items they might find useful. In the main hall, cots have been laid out so Ukrainians can rest. Outside the station, volunteers offer the newcomers a free ride to the next city. They take them to Katowice, Krakow, or even Berlin.
I can give 3 people a ride, for example, a woman and 2 children. I am willing and able to help.
Poland is well prepared for this stream of people. For weeks, they've been following government orders to set up aid centres, like this one called Ukrainian House, to offer help, including temporary accommodation. But these are chaotic times, and not everyone fleeing Ukraine has found Poland quite so welcoming, including foreign students.
The Ukrainians were let in, and the foreigners, they were segregated to one side.
Some have also complained of poor treatment at the hands of Ukrainian border guards.
All the black people, Arabic people especially, what I saw, they beat them, they towed their gun to them at night. It was snowing, just people wanted to walk. They stopped us like a 3 hour, they didn't let us walk, and people get aggressive.
Poland says it's admitted around 350,000 people from more than 120 countries. With war raging just a few kilometres away, sympathy for the refugees is mixed with a fear of what might come next.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to many false or misleading videos and pictures on social media. Sometimes it's hard to say what's real and what's not. So let's bring in DW's head of fact-checking, Joscha Weber. Welcome, Joscha. So let's define our terms first of all. What are we talking about when we talk about fake news in this conflict? And how do we identify it?
Well, we are currently facing a real flood of fakes and misleading content seeking our attention. A big part of them is actually old pictures or footage reused. To give you an example, Phil, this is a video that went viral on TikTok. We prepared it for you. I hope can show it to you. Yeah, it shows a huge explosion allegedly stemming from an attack in Ukraine a day before the Russian invasion began. But what should you make suspicious is that the trees and bushes are surprisingly green. And I see that we have a different video here up here, so I have to readjust. This is another video showing jets flying over an urban area. And these kind of jets were coming from an air show north of Moscow. So there was no link to the actual war, and because they were already from 2020. So these kind of old pictures appear and reappear in our social media feeds. And this is a big problem because we always have to see if they are from this precise war or if they are old. We can do this via reverse image search, which is important to say. And some pictures, as the one we seeing here right now, are from a video game. This is called Arma 3. And it's easily to detect, but yeah, a lot of people believe in them, Phil, and that this is a big problem.
Right, so how do we prevent ourselves from being fooled then?
In short, be skeptical, think twice and take a closer look. These next images show, for example, a Russian and Ukrainian jet fighting against each other. Really? No, we don't see this picture now. We see a different video. This is a German media brand. Okay, this is the right video. Sorry for that confusion. These images show an air fight between Russian and Ukrainian jets. Really? No, they are actually from a video game called Digital Combat Simulator, which was confirmed by the company behind this game. And these kind of animations are very realistic, so people think they are real. And social media users claim that this video shows the ghost of Kyiv, an Ukrainian fighter jet pilot. Some sources say that this pilot has shot down 6 Russian jets in just one day. He has become a myth of this war, and for some Ukrainian, he is a hero. And we have to say that this myth is going on social media. There are a lot of people searching for him. We searched for pictures, and we found the next clip. There are several pictures of him circulating, and we checked some of them. A lot of them are manipulated. They photoshopped another head on the pilot, which were coming original from Canada, or they remixed a picture of an Ukrainian soldier with a lawyer from Argentina, so a bit weird. And all this can be verified by reverse image search, Phil.
OK, thank you for that, Joscha. DW's head of fact-checking, Joscha Weber.